Hi, it's Ray. It's the Mr. Frontend podcast, episode 1. Maybe you're thinking, well, Mr. Frontend, episode 1, the podcast? Yeah, number 1. Because the first episode, or the audio file that I put it online, that was not real and podcast. It was more like I wanted to spread my message and give you a positive vibe. But now we are launching the podcast officially. So I hope you followed me as Mr. Frontend, Ray, on the blog, on social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever you like. If you didn't, please go to the mrfrontend.org or blog.mrfrontend.org and you can find all my social channels over there. But today in this first episode of the podcast, I want to talk with you about the most famous JavaScript framework war. Well, and it's not really a war, but for some developers that are starting out, it's a question. What should I learn? Should I learn Angular? Should I learn jQuery? Should I learn Ember? Should I learn React, Vue? Name some other JavaScript framework. Well, that's the question for most of the starting and maybe some more experienced developers. And it's maybe a good question. This week I've listened to another podcast from, I can't remember the name, but I will put it in the show notes. And he was proclaiming that learn a framework, not a language. And I was in the car and this was making me so angry. And I thought, how can he say that? And he was telling that he would piss some of the developers off. But it made me think. Why do I think you should learn a language instead of a framework? Or why should someone say you should learn a framework, not a language? And it was in my mind the whole week. And when I was driving home today, I was thinking, maybe it's not bad to learn JavaScript via a framework. So it made me think how I've learned JavaScript. And I was a developer. I knew HTML, CSS well. I'm sorry if you already know this story about me, but for those who don't know, I was very, in my opinion, at that point, I was very good in HTML, CSS, and I knew some jQuery. I could implement some cool, sliders with a cool plugin of jQuery and do some other fun stuff with it. And at a certain point that I wanted to have another job, I was hitting a wall, and that wall was I didn't know JavaScript. The companies told me that I didn't know JavaScript only because I only did some jQuery. And it was true, I didn't know JavaScript at that point. But, to make a long story much shorter, and to dive in the frameworks and what works for you. But that forced me to learn JavaScript. But I started with jQuery, and it was also a nice library. And it made me think. Not every developer or every designer who wants to learn JavaScript or front-end development is the same type of learner. everyone learns in a different way. Everyone have their own way of, getting information and learn from that. So, if you think about that, it's not a very bad idea to learn JavaScript via framework. But there are a few differences. If you want to learn JavaScript via a framework, it's, some things are very good from it. The starting point of making some real world application, it gives you more speed, and it's gonna make it a lot easier because the framework is doing a lot for you. But you won't know everything that's beneath it, and everything that the framework does for you don't know. But maybe it's not necessary at that point if you start learning to know that. Also, a framework is well tested most of the time and makes you write less code. Well, there's a lot of code inside the framework, but it's really giving you a jump start in creating your first application. So that's maybe not a bad thing. And if you start learning Vanilla JavaScript first, some people favor that. Well, in my opinion, I do favor that, but if it's not your way, because Vanilla JavaScript, it costs time. It really costs time to dive in some dumb elements. What is a for loop? What is a selector? What is, a lot of things you need to learn. And the learning process is maybe a little bit more slower. But when you start learning JavaScript and you learn a real vanilla JavaScript, it's, you will get a more stable knowledge about JavaScript. And, if you start learning with a framework, it's, you know that framework, but you don't know what's beneath that. And if you have a bug, it can be really hard to solve that bug. And if you know vanilla JavaScript, and you have spent a lot of time in it, then it could save some time. And if you have a bug, you will fix it more easily. Well, in some cases, if you forget a comma or some other stuff, then it's always gonna be really hard sometimes to find a bug. But in my opinion, vanilla JavaScript, the knowledge about that, if you have a strong knowledge, it's gonna save you time at the end. But most of the developers that start learning JavaScript find that hello world examples really boring. I can imagine that. But you can make that more interesting by making a to-do list. Wow, that's a great example. It's the most used example. But making a to-do list with vanilla JavaScript, that can be a challenge, but it's not that boring than the simple hello world. And I think if you start learning vanilla JavaScript, you should make it more interesting for yourself. Don't only loop through arrays, but loop through an array of to-do items with a title and a description, so you can learn how to use arrays and objects and properties. So it's gonna be more hands-on JavaScript. It's gonna be more practical. And with learning vanilla JavaScript, as I already told you, it's gonna save you a lot of time, but it costs a lot of time to gain that knowledge. So there is not a way that I will tell you that this one is better or this one is better, but you have to decide for yourself. You can really become really good in JavaScript by starting with a framework like Angular or React, but you don't need to. What I want to say, keep in mind that with that framework, it's all built on top of vanilla JavaScript. So at the time that you're hitting a wall, a bug, a knowledge wall, you should find help and find what's underneath it and find out what knowledge you are missing, so that you won't spend hours and hours and even days or weeks fixing a bug that maybe is super small. So there's not a right or is a wrong, but pick the method that fits you the most. If you are a learner by reading books about vanilla JavaScript, all the design patterns, all the other good stuff about JavaScript, well then buy a book online and read a book. And if you are more practical like me, then watch videos on YouTube of how other people write JavaScript or how someone is writing a application. Well, I'm doing YouTube videos myself to help you strengthen your knowledge about vanilla JavaScript. But if you need a course, take a course, but find the way you like to learn and make it easy for yourself. Make it fun for yourself, because you have to enjoy. Because if you enjoy the learning process, you are more motivated to continue. You are more motivated, and that will make you grow better, more efficient, more, maybe faster, but it will cost time. But being more motivated will help you a lot. It helped me a lot. But if you want to grow by going to meetups and conferences, go there and spend money on it if you want. But don't fight. Well, I should start positive with this. You should empower your way of learning. Your way of learning is not the same as your colleague or your friend. Your way of learning is your way, and you know the best way you can learn. So use that and discover what your way of learning is. Because as a developer, you should be a really, really good learner. That's the most important, because, well, at some point, if you know JavaScript really good, it is a framework or a vanilla JavaScript, it doesn't matter. But if you know it real good, it's gonna make you more flexible. And if you know vanilla JavaScript really good, it's gonna make you more flexible, because it doesn't matter what kind of framework the company is using. It doesn't matter which library they are using, because you know the basic. You know maybe not everything, but you have a strong knowledge of JavaScript then it will make your life much easier, because switching between React and Angular, Vue or Ember, it doesn't matter, because only the syntax is maybe different. Well, at this point they look all a lot familiar or similar to each other, but being flexible in whatever framework or library you use, it's gonna make your life much more fun and much more easy. And landing a job, if that's a problem for you, well, take this tip and make sure you are flexible, so you can achieve that by learning JavaScript really good. But that's my personal advice. Pick the way you like to do it. So I hope that this first episode of the Mr. Frontend podcast will really help you and will really guide you to the way you like to learn JavaScript. But let's make it a point. Let's make my last 3 tips and summarize everything I told you. My tip number 1: pick the way you like to learn. Just read a book if you like a book. Watch a video if you like a video. Watch someone else code if you like that. But pick the way you like to learn. Or even listen to a podcast. Of course, like this one, if you want that. But there are a lot more podcasts out there. Tip number 2. When you're hitting a wall of knowledge, of experience, ask for help. Always ask for help. And of course, you can come to the Mr. Frontend community. Ask something about your problem inside the free Facebook group, or join another community. It doesn't matter. But we want to welcome you and love to help you. But don't waste time by trying to fix it yourself. Because you only have to ask, so people will know that they can help you, and we love to help you. And tip number 3: if you are not sure about your experience, about your knowledge, find another developer online or in your company that want to help you, or that you can ask for help, or find someone who can guide you, or that want to mentor you, because that's gonna make it all a lot easier. I can tell you from my own experience. You can read my personal story about having a mentor on my personal blog. I will link it in the show notes so you can read it. So I want to end this podcast with asking you, how do you like to learn? Figure out how you want to learn. And if you don't know yet, well, ask for help. And we will, figure it out. Post a question in our Mr. Frontend Facebook group, and we will help you. So you can also put your answer under this podcast on SoundCloud or on YouTube, so we can discuss over there if you like that. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to support Mr. Frontend, the podcast and the blogs and videos I've created, then you can go to patreon.com/Mr. Frontend. And if you yeah, you can start supporting me from $1 a month. I would be very, very happy with it, because with that money I'm gonna pay for the web hosting, and so I can continue with making valuable content and making a lot more interesting videos. And if you have some tips for me or some questions that I can use in my next podcast, please send me via Facebook or via Twitter at FrontendMister on Facebook, facebook.com/MrFrontendCommunity. So I would love to know. And if you want to email me, you can do that by raymond@mrfrontend.nl. So I hope you like this podcast, and you can listen to this on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So hopefully see you next time. Have a good week. See you next week. Bye.